Welcome back to the Ardent Wife podcast. I'm so excited that you're here joining us for another episode. We've just been bringing it this season, and I'm so excited for this next episode that we're about to do with my sisters here, Jennifer and Tiffany, and we have an extra special guest, Mr. Allen, Rondey Allen, Jennifer's husband, who's going to be sharing with us about marriage counseling. I think that in this climate right now that we are in the United States, for this, I feel like it's kind of another epidemic that we're going on with marriages, with mental health. And marriage counseling is a great resource or tool to strengthen the bonds of marriage and just reconnect. So I'm glad, Rondi, that you're here just to give us some general info for people who might be curious about it, especially in the church. I feel like in the past it was dissuaded, but it's becoming much, much more available, accessible, and also suggested for marriages. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm definitely getting called on quite a bit, so I could see that, and it was cool. I had the honor of speaking at a marriage retreat recently, actually along with Jen. Both got to speak a little bit. That was a lot of fun, and people said they were blessed by it. So hopefully there'll be more of that.
And can you just share with our audience what you do?
Yeah, so I am one of the founders and executive director of a Christian counseling agency called Crosspoint Clinical Services. And from day to day, in a week, I'll probably see about 25 to 30 clients, and that could be individuals, adolescents, and probably about 10 to 12 couples a week. And so I do counseling, and I do the duties of being an executive director, and all that entails.
When it comes to marriage counseling, can you kind of give us like a description of what that looks like?
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's about strengthening the bond. It's about and it's interesting. Depends on how you look at it. So there's a scientific view that I draw on a lot. There's a couple by the name of John and Julie Gottman, which you'll hear me talk about throughout this, who really are the kind of the premier researchers of couples work. And what they do is they kind of study how couples connect. So they've got this place where they observe couples, like a reality TV show called the Love Lab, tens of thousands at this point since the 80s. And they just kind of quantify what causes people to connect and what causes people to disconnect. And so marriage counseling is about that work, about helping people to connect and teaching them how, teaching them skills, and just kind of strengthening that bond. But then we add the faith piece in this, and that explodes it. I feel like that takes it to another level, because we have this beautiful, perfect example in Jesus and the church that we are all trying to reconcile ourselves to, right? And we're led there in some supernatural ways, but then there are also skills that we have to build. So it's also about, in the Christian context, also about bringing that image in.
So, Rondey, what would you say to someone who I guess, what are the benefits of marriage counseling, even if like a couple would say, well, we're not having any problems, or like you see counseling as being for when there's a problem, then I go.
Yeah. Not having any problems. I go, right. That's what I say. But so the clinical world, globally speaking, whether it's medical or whatever clinical world, operates in terms of symptoms and functioning and disorders, right? Mm-hmm. And there's symptoms that people live with. Like medically, a person could have a hernia all their life and be like, oh, that's nothing. It's just a lump. That, give it a name, whatever, a limp, right? And people can be happy and learn to live with a limp. But if you think, man, and this is what you guys do, man, I really want to be stronger. I really want to, maximize my life. I really want to enjoy, life to the full here. That's a perspective to take too. So it really comes down to what you feel is intolerable and if you want to fix things, right? And so every marriage has problems, quote unquote, right? Interesting thing from these folks, the Gottmans, they said that about 68% of all conflicts in marriage will not be resolved. Right. So you trying to persuade your partner that this is the right way to do this, or you shouldn't do that. A lot of that's not going to take. But what you develop instead is mutual understanding. You learn to live. You learn how to live in mutual understanding and respect. You may not fix things in the way that you want to, but what you grow in is patience. What you grow in is intimacy. What you grow in is learning how to offer unconditional love. So it just depends on how interested you are in that. And marriage counseling can be a great tool to pursue that, I think. Even
And
outside of spirituality.
sorry. And so you mentioned that all marriages have problems. How do you know when you need it then? Like, because I think, like you were saying, like I may be walking with a limp. Somebody on the outside looking in may be like, oh, that's like deadly. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
me, I'm like, oh, that's nothing. So how do you know? Because some people see problems in different ways and different severity. Like,
Sure. Well, similar to the medical thing, some problems are catastrophic. Some things are more than a limp, right? Um, in Gottman, the way that they explain kind of what leads up to divorce, they have an understanding of conflict that it's normal, but there are certain things that cause it to really go south. They call them the four horsemen. And based on in one study that they did with over 3,000 couples, they predicted with 91% accuracy if a couple was going to divorce based on the presence of these horsemen. These horsemen are criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. And contempt is the most deadly, most toxic of the horsemen. It's when you start to weaponize shame. You're no longer just disagreeing about the topic, you're devaluing the person. It's no longer, honey, I think this plant should go here. It's what kind of idiot puts a plant there, right? And when you start to devalue the whole person, and this is catastrophic. This doesn't last. This is predictive of the marriage not being sustainable. Um, and then and betrayals can be an ultimate form of contempt. Saying that you're not good enough, so therefore I'm going to take up with somebody else. Um, Another way of thinking about contempt is it turns shame into a weapon, because every human being walks around with a condition of shame. They feel like they're not enough. They wonder if they're enough. Am I man enough? Am I woman enough? Am I handsome enough? Am I strong enough? Do I provide enough? Whatever. And contempt is when you hear out of your partner that you're not enough, because you can't look at your past. You're the one who X, Y, and Z. Look at your weakness. You can't even X, Y, and Z. You compare yourself to them and put them in the inferior. Well, if you're a good Christian like me, if you did the right thing like me, all these things that cause your partner, that amplify their sense of shame, right? And shame, makes us do some irrational, crazy things. We, this is what drives people to their vices. This is what makes people fly off the handle. And in some ways, this is what makes people cheat, for example. So I feel bad about myself and this person, in the presence of this person, so I'm going to go to this person makes me feel good about myself, and this is where I'm going. But those are kind of some of the catastrophic problems. Not to minimize, not all problems are the same. You're right. Just like not all symptoms are the same. But for the average couple that isn't on the verge of divorce, they they could still often benefit from some level of guidance, because we all have hangups, patterns, habits in our marriage.
And I think that's good to hear, because I wouldn't have, for listeners out there to know, like, if this is happening in my marriage, then maybe we should start to look for someone and get some not premarital, but marital counseling.
I also have a question. Is there a difference between counseling and mediation?
Yeah, so mediation is about resolving a conflict. Counseling is about building skills, right? Um, and sustainable skills, which should include some conflict management for sure. Poorly managed conflict. Another way of maybe answering your question, Tiffany, is some of the common reasons that people come to counseling. One of the biggest ones is poorly managed conflict, that people are fighting in a way that they often get into contempt, and it makes it so that they have a hard time tolerating their partner. They feel like they can't stand their partner, or they don't like to be around their partner, and typically contempt and withdrawal, those kind of things. So that's a definitely, you deal with conflict within the context of marriage counseling, but marriage counseling also talk about how to build intimacy, how to build your friendship, how to have what they call rituals of connection, how to bond, um, how to be present with each other, those things which aren't necessarily included in mediation.
Yeah, I ask that because I feel like in the Christian community, they'll often go to mediation with a peer in church, whether you're in small group with someone or you find someone more seasoned in marriage, versus going to counseling as a substitute
Mm,
for what they really need, which is probably counseling. So I just wanted you to share like what the difference is, because if someone's like, well, I've been going to peer mediation with my sister and brother in Christ over here for years, but they're still in a space where they probably might benefit from counseling, because that
right.
mediation is not really, it's kind of just superficial versus getting into what's really needed.
Right, right, yeah, yeah. And it's actually that both I think offer something different that are valuable. I think I love Jen and I. We hang out with other couples and get input about things, and that particular person, that pastoral counseling function is to help me to live up to my values as a Christian, right? And a therapist isn't necessarily going to do that. A therapist isn't trying to make you accountable. They're just trying to teach. They're trying to support. They're trying to listen. But they're not going to say, "Hey, brother, you said right. Remember
Mhm.
this is something that you were praying about. And you said you wanted to work on." That's more of a pastoral function, which I think both have a necessary place in being thriving.
So, how do you help the Christian community? Like, because often we've talked about this with other people too, this idea of like, well, I just need more faith. I just need to pray. Like, how do you help the Christian community
Hmm.
think about going to a counselor and feeling safe about it? Kind of
Hmm.
run across that. How do you help?
Yeah, so I think generally speaking, um, the gospel is about Jesus giving us freedom to work through our faults, right? Giving us so it is the challenge. I think one of the challenges I think I see in the Christian world is there's an orientation toward morality and toward perfectionism that can make you ashamed of your mistakes and therefore want to hide them, and then that often makes them worse. That often amplifies whatever issues that you're dealing with. Um, but when you're walking in grace, you can really examine where you fall short and know that it's been covered, and you can actually grow through that. You can leverage it in order to become more like Jesus. You'll become more grateful for His grace. Um, so I think to the Christian world, um, man, the blood of Jesus gives us the opportunity to overcome these things. Um, and why not, come into the light and get as much light as possible
Mhm.
in these areas of our life in order to grow. It's not one of those things that is necessary. You're a bad Christian if you don't get Christian counseling, obviously, right? It's not,
Right.
but man, it can benefit, and it can, for most people, well, often it can.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like what the Spirit had in mind, and He's guiding us to science. I found that science also points to, right.
Mhm.
So the Bible actually gives a pretty limited 3 or 4 passages that are explicitly about marriage, right? Although there's other things that apply, submitting to another, being kind, and being gentle and patient and what have you. But specifically about marriage, there's only a few of them. But it's really been interesting to me as kind of a little bit of a nerd of the science. Like I like listening to it and reading it a lot. How much it points toward even what God said in the scriptures, right? Um,
Mm.
a specific example is the Gottman's found that there's a high correlation between marital satisfaction overall and the wife having a voice, feeling that she has a voice. which reminds me a lot of First Peter 3, where it says, "Husbands, be considerate," right? And lay down your life. And so some really godly people have great marriages, right? You don't want to discount that. There are people that are very humble, who just get it and just honor their husbands and wives in a great way, just pretty naturally. Maybe they've had a good example. Maybe they've just got a security that helps them to be gracious with their spouse, and there's nothing wrong with that, and that did happen without counseling for sure. I find those exceptional marriages definitely can be a challenge to and I think most people would feel that they've got areas that they struggle. Many people.
Now, Rondey, what should someone look for in a marriage counselor? Like, is there specific certifications, specific traits or experience we should be looking for?
Yeah, well, I'm a big advocate specifically. So this same research, folks, they have a training and certification at different levels. I'm a huge advocate of it I'll back up a little bit and tell you how I got into marriage counseling. So I was in private practice starting in about 2009, and this was my full-time gig at the time, and so I was diversifying the types of services that I could provide in order to expand, the work that I could do. And I kind of started off working with adolescents, then adults, adult men, adult women, and those things were going pretty well. So I said, let me give marriage counseling a try. And it didn't go like that. It's not as intuitive. It's not as intuitive as individual counseling, and so doing good work is very much a skill. And because what the mistake that I made at that time, and I would have situations where couples would blow up and one would walk out the door and it just didn't work. It just didn't go well. Is I would mediate, and that's the last thing that you want to do as a couples counselor. You don't want to get in between someone's conflict and go, oh well, he's got a point there, or she's got a point there. You're not helping them to get better that way. What like Gottman teaches is you're trying to help them to have the tools to resolve their own conflict. You're trying to teach them. I teach them about these 4 horsemen. So these are the things while you're working out your conflict that you want to avoid. So I think you want a skill-based teacher. I think you want someone who isn't, just going to listen to each side and mediate, right? That's not the same as a good counseling experience. It's not gonna grow you in your skill base. You want someone, because otherwise you're gonna need to take that person home with you to mediate all your conflicts, right? You're gonna need them in your back pocket for every conflict you're gonna have in between sessions and after the therapy, right? You want someone that's gonna help you to grow your skills in your relationship so that it's sustainable without therapy, right? Gotcha. And the Gottman kind of program teaches therapists to do just that. There's a few other ones, EFT and Imago relationship. I found this one to be the most specifically skill-based and structured. And they have measures, they have questionnaires, they have a lot of great tools. So yes, I would highly recommend Gottman trained therapists.
Okay. Thank you.
And you can ask them that, like, are you a Gottman trained therapist or?
Yeah, you can Google it. Whenever you're looking up the therapist, that's specifically a thing that you could ask about. And some kind of evidence-based approach. I mean, I'll put that underneath that. Maybe there's Susan Johnson has an EFT model that's very popular. There's this other one, Imago relationship therapy. Not as popular. It used to be more popular maybe about 10 years ago. It's kind of dying down. So there are other ones out there, but personally, for my dime, I really think that Gottman it's been sustainable. It's the most deeply researched. It's very congruent with Christian values. That find someone that's Christian and that you really have a good experience often.
What is something that you've learned, sitting in the seat as a Christian therapist, that you think would be beneficial for our listeners, that you think would be helpful? Do you have any takeaways of things that you've learned?
Well, speaking from the Christian side, um, I think that the what the scriptures say about marriage. Again, it's only a few passages. It's simple, but it's profound. That First Peter 2 to 3 passage, which I know you guys brought up in a podcast recently. I heard your episode there, where there's such a direct correlation between the cross and being submissive, being considerate as a man and a wife. That's profound. That's profound. I think God in His grace very succinctly pointed us to the thing that we would need to work on the most, but would also be the most transformative. It takes for me to, uh, as a husband, to trust that if I lean into my wife's needs, that it's going to help her to do well. Though I'm full of doubt. I think what gets in the way as a husband is, I can feel like, can I do it? Is it too much? I don't know if I can handle it. I don't know if I can, but leaning in anyway, in a way, just like Jesus went to the cross, just like I'm going to value, it's powerful, it's profound. And then it brings out the best in us. I think it illustrates something for us individually. We get to experience what Jesus experienced, right? And then gosh, your kids around you and people around you, it's they experience it as a miracle too. Godly marriages are breathtaking, whether you are into church or not. When you see a loving, humble, tender, you know self-offering, self-sacrificial marriage,
Mhm.
it is a modern walking miracle.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so, Rondi, I have a question for you. And maybe this is part of my selfishness. I have a marriage counselor here, and so I
Hmm.
need a tool. So is there is there like a simple tool that you found that you offer to your clients, like something maybe you find yourself like recommending over and over again, like we could do at home with our husbands? Is there like this something
Hmm.
practical that we can do maybe that would build emotional intimacy with our husband? Like, yeah,
Universal, I'm
yeah,
thinking.
like yes,
Like
yes.
a
Thank
general.
you for that.
That's funny. Yeah. So I mean, I think it is. I really advocate for the practice of learning together. Right. Just learning together itself. I'll tell you some specific books and programs that we found helpful, but just the idea of of recognizing, because when you put yourself in a learning posture, right? You're acknowledging that I don't have it all together, right? And that we have things to learn. We both have habits. And you're saying the problem and the area for growth isn't just you need to stop doing whatever, but we need to learn this in our marriage, right? The problem is the marriage, right? So I think the process itself of learning and growing, which can be in a book or a counselor or both, right? I'd say that itself is, God has its own power, right? So within that, I mean, I've been saying, not to sound too repetitive, but the Gottman folks, they have a book called Seven Principles for Making Relationships Work. They've got 30 books, right? But that's a good primer. That's a good starting point. Um, and even kind of hit the background of that book, how we got exposed to that. So when I first got out of graduate school, 2003, Jen and I, maybe we just got married. We had just gotten married, actually. I was working at a pastoral counseling center that was out of the basement of this church. And when we were working there, the handful of therapists who worked there would eat lunch together. We'd eat in a circle and would talk about different things, give each other input about cases or whatever. And yeah, because it was our first anniversary, I said, Jen and I were getting ready to go away for our anniversary. Is there anything you guys would recommend? I asked the same question, and they said in chorus, Gottman. They said all together at the same time. This is 2003, right? And 2005. I'm sorry. And the seven principles specifically was what they recommended. And so basically what it is, it's a summary of their research and just a little more about their research. So they have this artificial living situation, bed and breakfast, called the Love Lab. And they got microphones and cameras and heart sensors and all this stuff like a reality TV show. And through this research and observing tens of thousands of couples, they divided these couples into what they call the masters of relationship, where people married 30 years or more and highly satisfied, the disasters of relationship, people on the brink, and then everybody in between, right? And so a lot of the principles that are described are what they found the masters do. What are the key differences between these relationships that are thriving and the ones that are struggling, right? They're going to tell you stories, they're going to give exercises, and that's just a little introduction to the work that is kind of further in the therapy work. So in the therapy work, they have things like they have a questionnaire that each person in the couple does, and then it spits out like an analysis of your answers and identifies areas of distress and strength, kind of like a computer diagnostic does for a car, telling you guys are doing great here, you're struggling here. And then it makes recommendations of even exercises that you do to strengthen this and to strengthen that, right? But just as a primer, that book is great. On the spiritual side, so Jen and I do that a lot. We read a lot of books and watch a lot of things on Right Now Media. There's this class called Cherish, which also has a book. And what I love about that is it unpacks the passion part, because I think in Christian world, we're taught about the duty and commitment a lot. 1 Corinthians 13, always perseveres and such. But he talked about how much what we long for and miss often is you're my one and only, and there's no one like you, and I'm captivated by you. And so what that class does is it unpacks that part through the Song of Solomon. Actually kind of highlights things in there. And so that one's called Cherish, and then 7 Principles are 2 specific things. But just, I think if you're reading and trying to learn about how to do better in your marriage, it's going to create a reflective process. Just like individually, you're going to read something, you're going to think, wow, that's me, or I don't agree with that, but that reflective process is what helps you to be self-aware, and it's what helps you to change and grow.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really good. So if a wife has listened to our episode today and she's like, I want to just kind of see, what would the steps that she need to take to maybe start marriage counseling?
Knowing that this is national, a good basic resource, there's a directory called the Psychology Today Therapy Directory, therapist.psychologytoday.com. And that I recommend that a lot, because it's just people in private practice, which is a little different. Sometimes you go to the big agencies that are in every area, and sometimes there's a lot of turnover. There's often a lot of turnover in those agencies, and it's people that, and it's just when you do the private practice segment, you find people that are a little bit more established, a little bit more maybe have a niche, generally speaking. And then within that, you can filter by couples, you can filter by Gottman training in that too. That's one place I'd start.
What about approaching her husband about it? Maybe she's like, we need counseling. But I don't know if he knows this.
Yeah, well, you know what? I love, all right, so in the Gottman model, so they talk about what makes conflict go south. They have this criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling, right? So what you want to be careful is that your request for counseling doesn't sound like criticism, doesn't sound like, you need to get it together, or you're not doing your job, or something like that, right? And what they recommend as the opposite of criticism, because they have antidotes to those 4 horsemen too, which I could talk about if you want. But one of the ones that they recommend that is kind of, I think, most transformative is something called gentle startup. Is learning how to raise a complaint, right, through your feelings, as opposed to, pointing at the person. So criticism is, you always leave your socks on the floor. That's why this house is such a mess. If you pick up after yourself, maybe, or you're doing whatever. Gentle startup is your experience. Honey, I walked in and I saw the sock, and I just thought, I've been cleaning the house all day, and I felt like you haven't seen it, what I've been doing. And I just felt discouraged because having a clean house means a lot to me because I grew up in a house where it wasn't the case. And so it helps me to feel orderly. So it would really help me if you would pick up your socks. So apply that to marriage. So, honey, I've been feeling like we've been really disconnected. I really want the best for us. I always dreamed. I remember when we dated and we had such a great time, and I feel like we've gotten off track and we're missing each other. And man, I think we could grow. I would like to grow with you. I'd like to, finish the race with you. Can we get marriage counseling? Do you think? So it's locating it within you, because there's a part of us, husband or wife, that doesn't want to. That's moved when we know our partner is suffering. Now, we're not moved in the right way when we know we're told we've done something wrong. I'm doing something wrong again, right? We want to defend ourselves. We want to say, well, wow, tell me about socks. I work hard all day, and you want me about a sock? Didn't I get my shirt in there? Didn't I? Isn't that your sock over there? Right?
Facts.
Right? That's called
Yeah.
defensiveness. That's the second horseman, defensiveness. But when we understand that our partner is hurting and we understand what they're hurting about, it makes us want to lean in, most of the time. Now, this is no guarantee. There's no quick, we can't manipulate people. No, it doesn't guarantee that this person's gonna respond well, but they're gonna walk away thinking about the story you described. If they walk away, they're gonna walk away thinking, wow, she really misses me. She said she really wants to be connected. She really believes in us. So the template for that is I feel about what I need. I feel about what I need. So when I feel, you describe your experience, right? And the more vulnerable, the better. And then what's causing that experience, and then what you think would fix it with a positive request. Could you please? Would it be possible? I would appreciate it if. I feel about what I need.
I think that statement's just great communication skills. I'm like, I can use that on my team too. Not manipulating.
No. It's what our heart needs. It's what our heart needs, right? Because it appeals to compassion and empathy, rather than some rule, rather than some, something. We can appeal to a lot of things in order to try to move someone's behavior. But when there's a self-offering, I need you. Could you help me? It's just going to land on anybody differently.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you so much.
Mm.
It has been such a pleasure. You've given us so much, just a kind of like foundational all the way to practical tips for marriage counseling. And so I would love for you to share. I know we are national, but do you service people virtual or is it only in person?
We do virtual, but we're limited by the states in which we're licensed in, which right now are states in our area, Connecticut, obviously mostly Massachusetts where I live, but a few in Connecticut, Rhode Island, Vermont. That's it. Those
All right,
four
New
states.
England friends, other
Yeah.
than New Hampshire, if you are interested in reaching out to Rondey for Crosspoint clinical services, I would definitely recommend him. And if not, he gave you really practical tools in this episode for marriage counseling. And so we just want to provide you with all that you need so that you can grow in a healthy boundaries in your marriage, and so that you can grow closer to Jesus in your marriage. And sometimes it takes somebody outside. And so if you're part of the Ardent Wives Club, definitely you can reach out to us. We will share with you Rondey's information or where you can go. If you're not a part of the Ardent Wives Club, go ahead and click down below and join us there. If you have any comments or messages that you want to share with us, we really want to hear from you. That would be fantastic too. And until next time, my beautiful Ardent Wives, come cry with us, laugh, and grow closer to Jesus.